You can be doing everything right with money saving when you can, avoiding stupid purchases, trying to be responsible, and still feel like you're getting absolutely nowhere. And the frustrating part is, it's not just in your head. For a lot of people, the first few $1,000s are the hardest money they will ever try to save. Not because they're bad with money, but because they're trying to build discipline without stability. And here's the strange part. Once you get past that early stage, it often gets noticeably easier. Not because you suddenly become better, but because you're no longer operating in survival mode. That sounds backwards. It shouldn't be true. But there's a real reason for it, and once you understand what's actually happening, you stop blaming yourself and start changing the system. I'm Dan, and I focus on the parts of money most people miss, and this is one of the big ones. Because what makes this difficult isn't just discipline, it's how your brain behaves when money is low, and that changes everything. Let's start with the obvious question. Why would $5,000 be harder than 100,000? On paper, it shouldn't be. 100,000 is 20 times more money. It takes longer. It requires consistency. So what's actually going on? A big part of the answer comes down to something you could call baseline scarcity psychology. When you have very little saved, your brain doesn't operate in long-term planning mode. It operates in short-term survival. And survival mode doesn't care about your future. It cares about relief right now. Even if there's no immediate danger, a near zero balance feels like one. And when your brain perceives a threat, it prioritizes immediate relief over long-term benefit. Every time. This isn't a personal flaw, it's a system mismatch. Your brain was built for short-term threats, not long-term money decisions. So what does that look like in practice? You set aside $200. A week passes. Something small happens. Work stress, a car issue, a social event, or nothing specific. Just pressure. And your brain looks for relief, but your brain doesn't solve stress. It reduces it. And the fastest way to reduce it is spending. You use the money you just saved. You feel better for 5 minutes, then worse the next day. And the cycle resets. That's the trap. You're not failing to save. You're stuck in a loop your brain is designed to win. That's why the first 5,000 can feel unusually difficult. You're not just building a habit. You're trying to build stability from a position that feels unstable. And that makes every decision heavier. Now here's where things start to shift. And this is the part most people never reach because they quit just before it happens. Once you build even a small cushion, something changes. Not in your bank account, in your behavior. When there's a bit of margin, the urgency drops. You stop reacting and start choosing. The same person who couldn't hold on to savings at a few $100s can suddenly stay consistent at a few thousand. Not because they became disciplined, because the pressure finally eased. That's the shift. Saving doesn't get easier because you improved. It gets easier because survival stops. And this is why moving from 5,000 to 20,000 often feels faster. The numbers are bigger, but the resistance is lower. You're no longer fighting yourself every step of the way. So the real question is, how do you get through that first stage when your own instincts are working against you? The first thing to understand is this. Willpower is not the solution. If your system relies on you making the right decision in the moment, you've already lost. Willpower fluctuates. Stress kills it. Fatigue kills it. Routine kills it. You don't rise to your goals, you fall to your systems. So instead of relying on discipline, you build structure. The most effective way to do that is automation, with friction, not just automatic transfers. Separation, different bank, no card. Delays on access. Because when the impulse hits, you don't need more discipline. You need time. And even a small delay can break the decision. The second shift is how you think about the goal. 5,000 feels overwhelming when you're starting from a few hundred. So your brain rejects it. Not because it's impossible, but because it feels distant. So you shrink the target. 1,000, then the next. Progress needs to feel visible or your brain stops tracking it. The third piece is understanding your patterns, because spending isn't random. It's predictable. Stress, boredom, social pressure, habit. If you don't identify your triggers, you'll keep repeating them. You don't need perfect solutions, you just need alternatives that don't reset your progress. There's another layer most people ignore: social gravity. Your spending habits aren't just yours, they're shaped by what feels normal around you. What people spend on food, travel, lifestyle. That becomes your baseline without you realizing it. It's not something you consciously choose, it's something you absorb. What feels like a normal dinner? What feels like a cheap trip? What feels like a reasonable purchase? Those reference points don't come from logic, they come from environment. And when you try to save, especially early on, you're not just managing money. You're pushing against what feels normal. That friction is real. It's subtle, but it shows up constantly. Saying no when everyone else is saying yes. Spending less when everyone else is spending freely. Making decisions that don't quite match the pace around you. And over time, that creates pressure. Not dramatic pressure, just enough to slowly pull you back toward the average. The solution isn't isolation, it's alignment. You don't need to cut people off or completely change your lifestyle, but you do need at least one reference point that supports the direction you're trying to go. Even one person with similar goals can completely change your trajectory, because behavior follows environment more than intention. If the people around you normalize spending, you'll drift toward spending. If the people around you normalize saving, you'll drift toward saving. You don't need a perfect environment. You just need one that doesn't constantly pull against you. And then, at some point, something clicks. Not dramatically, not overnight, but noticeably. For most people, it happens somewhere between 2 and 5,000 saved. You look at your account, and for the first time, there's space. Not huge, but real. Enough that things feel slightly different. And that difference matters more than it seems. Because up until this point, money has probably felt temporary. Something that comes in and disappears. Something you try to control, but never quite hold on to. But now, for the first time, there's evidence. Proof that money can stay. Proof that progress is possible. Proof that your actions actually compound. And something shifts. Saving stops feeling like restriction. It starts feeling like control, like optionality, like breathing room. You're not just reacting anymore, you have a margin, and that margin changes how you think. Decisions feel less urgent. Mistakes feel less catastrophic. You don't feel like one bad week erases everything. You start thinking slightly further ahead. Not perfectly, but enough. That moment matters more than the money. Because from that point on, you're no longer trying to prove you can save. You already have. And that changes your identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who is trying to be better with money. You start seeing yourself as someone who is better with money. And behavior tends to follow identity. Once that shift happens, consistency becomes easier. Not effortless, but more natural. That's what the first 5,000 really is. Not a financial milestone, a behavioral one. It's the point where your habits start working with you instead of against you. So if this stage feels difficult, that doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It means you're at the exact point where most people struggle. You're building stability without having it yet. You're going against habit, environment, and instinct all at once. And that's hard, but this part passes. And more importantly, it compounds. Because once you get through it, you don't just have money, you have a system, you have proof, you have momentum. And the way through it isn't intensity. It's not perfect discipline. It's not extreme restriction. It's consistency. Small systems, fewer decisions, less friction. Because the goal isn't to force better behavior, it's to make better behavior easier. And once that happens, the numbers follow. If this made you rethink how saving actually works, subscribe. Because this channel isn't about motivation, it's about understanding money properly so you stop guessing and start building something that actually works.